He is the father of monsters, the mother of horses, the thief of prized possessions across the Norse realms, and he is the architect of the end of the world. In popular culture today, we have come to know the god Loki as a misunderstood anti-hero, the charismatic brother of Thor in the Marvel Universe. But if you strip away all of the humour and the petty tricks that he plays, he is a deeply mysterious and commonly debated anomaly within the Norse Pantheon. Historically, Loki isn't just a villain or a trickster. He is the knot, or kink, in the straight thread of Norse mythology. Today, we are going to be looking at the actual historical evidence, the ancient poems, the runic stones, and the 13th century sagas to understand who Loki really was to the Scandinavian people, and why he represents a chaos we're still trying to define today, and how we can benefit and grow from Loki's character. To understand Loki, we first have to realize that he's an absolute ghost in ancient world history. Unlike the other major Norse gods like Odin, Thor, or Tyr, who were worshipped by early Germanic and Anglo-Saxon tribes centuries before the Viking Age, Loki has no ancient reference or any mention. He is entirely missing from any of the Germanic records. So our primary knowledge of him comes from much later medieval Icelandic texts. The first is the well-known Prose Edda, written around 1220 Common Era by the Icelandic scholar and politician Snorri Sturluson, and the second is the Poetic Edda, another further collection of traditional poems compiled in the late 13th century. These Eddas were written down long after Scandinavia had converted to Christianity, however, which leads many scholars to have fiercely debated who Loki originally was. Legendary folklorist Jacob Grimm famously argued that Loki was a primordial fire god, based on a linguistic connection to the German word lo, meaning fire. However, this connection was later proven false. Others, like Jan de Vries, categorized him strictly as a trickster archetype, similar to other indigenous North American figures, such as coyote or raven. But the reality is far more complex. Loki is an untamed enigma within the Norse pantheon. So when is Loki first actually mentioned in human history? The absolute oldest written record we have of Loki is a skaldic poem called Hustlong, which translates to Autumn Long, composed around the year 900 CE by Norwegian court poet named Thjodolfr. And Hustlong is what historians call the shield poem. So the poet is literally describing mythological scenes intricately painted onto a shield. In this poem, Loki is already described by his alternative name and is referred to as Farboti's boy. This proves that his complex mythology had already been fleshed out and established at this point. And the physical archaeology confirms and matches the poetry. If we look at the 10th century Gosforth Cross in Cumbria, England, we can see a stone carving of a bound man with a woman holding a cup over his face to catch the dripping venom of a snake. This refers to the story of Loki being bound beneath the earth after the murder of Balder. And around 1000 CE, we get the Snapton stone in Denmark, a blacksmith's hearthguard featuring a carved face with scarred, stitched up lips. This is a direct reference to the myth where Loki loses a bet to the dwarves and has his mouth sewn shut. In the narrative structure of the myths, Loki's lineage makes him a permanent outsider. He is born of the giant, Farboti, yet he is accepted into the inner circle of the gods as the blood brother of Odin, the king. As scholar Margaret Clunies-Ross has pointed out, the Norse gods maintained a rigid system of negative reciprocity. They took treasures and women from the giants, but Absolute forbade the giants from taking anything from them. Now, Loki exists right on this fragile boundary of this social system as he constantly puts the gods' asset at risk, but he only uses his intellect later to steal them back. Now, Loki also completely shatters the rigid medieval Norse gender system. He is a shapeshifter who dynamically transitions between male and female forms, and in one myth he famously transforms into a mare to lure away a giant stallion, becomes pregnant and gives birth to Odin's eight-legged horse Sleipnir. And in another bizarre tale, where he's meant to settle a blood feud with a giantess Skathi, Loki ties a rope between his own genitals and the beard of a goat in a grotesque tug of war. Scholars like Stephanie von Schnurbein note that this performative, comical self-humiliation radically challenged traditional Scandinavian expectations of masculinity, allowing Loki's social standing to make him a safe target for mockery among the people. For a long time, the gods tolerate Loki because his cunning serves as a catalyst that triggers the creation of their greatest assets. One famous example being Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. But eventually, a dark shift occurs, and Loki moves from a harmless, mischievous trickster to the agent of absolute malevolence, bent on destroying the Norse gods and their world. The ultimate breaking point is the death of Balder, the most beautiful and beloved god in Asgard. Loki orchestrates his assassination by tricking the blind god Huther into throwing a dart made of mistletoe, the only substance on earth that could harm Balder. Following this tragedy, we see Loki's ultimate rebellion in the poetic Edda poem called Lokasenna. This is where Loki crashes a formal feast of the gods, gets drunk, and systematically unleashes a torrent of lethal insults at everyone present. He accuses even Odin of cowardice and unmanly witchcraft, taunts the goddesses for infidelity, and openly boasts that he is the sole reason Balder will never return from the underworld. It is a moment of total moral disintegration for Loki, and ultimately leads to his banishment and punishment by the gods. They bind Loki to the rocks using the entrails of his own son, leaving him to writhe under a serpent's venom until the cosmos unravels. When the apocalyptic battle of Ragnarok finally begins, Loki breaks his chains. He captains the terrifying ship Naglfar, built from the fingernails of dead men, and leads the legions of monsters and giants into war against Asgard. This includes his children Hela, Fenrir, and Jormungandr. Loki meets his end in mutual death match against Heimdall, the guardian of the gods. To conclude, the historical Loki wasn't like a modern comic book villain, as we may know him today. To the ancient Norse, he was the personification of entropy, the unknown, the incalculable. The Scandinavian people valued their rigid social structures, unbreakable oaths, and ancestral honour. Loki was a terrifying, necessary reminder that order is always fragile, and that change, no matter how destructive, is completely inevitable. On the contrast with Odin, who tries his absolute best to prevent Ragnarok from happening. Today, we can learn many things from Loki's character. The constant mischief and upsetting of the balance of life that he causes to the gods of Asgard forces them to grow, innovate, and come together. As said previously, Loki is responsible for the creation of the gods' most valuable and important items, whether it be the defense of Asgard with Mjolnir, or the beauty of Sif's new golden hair. This shows that no matter how chaotic our life can be sometimes, stagnation and idleness are no factors for our own personal growth. We must be challenged in order to learn and to grow. And he also teaches us to not be so serious about ourselves. The psychologist Carl Jung famously notes that the trickster is a collective shadow archetype of our deep psyche. Loki dynamically shifts form, crossing boundaries of species, social class, and gender. He shifts from male to female, becomes a mother to Sleipnir, the horse, and routinely humiliates his own masculinity to maintain peace or provoke laughter. Now, this is a direct warning against toxic rigidness. And when we refuse to acknowledge our vulnerabilities, our chaotic impulses, or our non-conforming traits, they don't disappear, they only fester. Loki forces us to look directly into our own internal shadow. If we do not actively integrate our inner chaos, it will eventually shatter our lives from the outside, much like Loki breaks his own chains at Ragnarok. Thanks for watching my video, everyone. If you want to dive deeper into the text I referenced for this character, please check out the description below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you view Loki as an inherently evil figure, or just an inevitable force of nature?